My chat says you want to talk. No, I don't want to do this. I'm so tired of this. LOL, you really want to own someone on this, don't you? Wait, no, I just don't feel like talking about it right now. Oh, fuck me, dude.
Oh,
38
God.
months,
You really
wowie.
Okay, listen, I'm exhausted after today, okay? But somebody just linked me this like very little clip that I was just going over real quick.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So like sometimes I say people as like a broader term for like these are like general things that economists say about a particular thing. I know that sometimes use people to like sneak in their own arguments. I mean, if you really want, I can try to find data for this. I mean, I read this in the course of my research, but I don't think it's a particularly debated claim to say that labor regulations or like environmental regulations are generally seen as pretty harsh when you put them on developing countries. Do you think that's like a contested claim?
Yeah, I kind of do, but it's all related to like the scale and scope.
Well, so
right?
like real quick. Oh my God, dude! Wait, hold on. Let me just say this, and then you can tell me if you agree or disagree. I've been talked over so much today. Okay, so my understanding, the economic understanding that I have is that first world countries are usually like pretty aggressive when it comes to wanting to put certain regulations on third world countries. When I say first world or third world, I'm talking about like scales of economy, not like Cold War era, who's the first world, second world, third world, right? The reason why developing countries have problems with this, especially when it comes to like environmental regulations, is first world countries were able to pollute the fuck out of everything, industrialize as hard as possible, and now that their economies are in this like very advanced state, now they're saying, okay, we're going to push for alternative energies. But when you look at a third world economy that is trying to industrialize, trying to advance their manufacturing and their economy and everything and become more sophisticated, that if you start placing these regulations on them, those economies are like, hey, fuck you, this is bullshit, which is why there are so many exemptions made for them in like these like larger international, like the Paris Accord and shit. Like it's usually like these guys get a lot more leeway. I'm aware of that being like a pretty well accepted thing. If you're not,
so here's what I would say to that is like, so just because the United States was not aware of the extent of what industrial pollution could be while we were industrializing, doesn't mean that the optimal path that you take today to develop should be ignoring environmental regulations.
Okay,
like for example,
I never said that.
Let me explain what I mean. Like, so say you were developing today and you're building an electrical grid. You could support that electrical grid through a mix of renewable energy, hydroelectric power, et cetera, right? And produce a low carbon energy system. Or you could build coal plants and you could produce energy that way. And we know that the coal plants have all these externalities that they're it now is much more expensive than the price would indicate. And when we were making coal plants...
Wait. What do you mean more expensive than the price would indicate?
It's called the negative externalities of coal.
Okay,
so like
hold on. Yeah, but the definition of an externality is that it can't be captured necessarily by a direct cost.
I was referring to the societal cost. You're sorry for not being
sure. I'm just being very, because you got me in the moderate thing yesterday, so I'm being very particular with my language here. Okay, that an externality is by definition not captured in the pricing of a damage that's being done to a society. So if
no, yeah, hold on. You're right that it's not in the. So like if I have a coal plant.
Okay.
And I sell you electricity, the price that I charge you does not include the pollution that's caused, the CO2, all that stuff.
Unless there's a cap and trade or something, yeah.
So in other words, all the third parties that are in the town who might not want to buy electricity from me are being negatively impacted by me selling you coal energy. And so I'm being subsidized, like your use of that coal energy is being subsidized by everybody in that town in an implicit way.
Sure.
So coal is not actually as cheap as the price you're paying. We're just not capturing those costs.
Sure.
So like when a third world country or a developing country is now developing, if we give them exceptions to environmental regulations, what we're doing is we are subsidizing their development through the use of environmental degradation.
Okay. But that's
we
should just
should just directly subsidize them with money.
Sure.
And not with environmental degradation.
If you
And that's
want to
why
do
giving
that,
them
if you want to
exceptions
have
is
a comprehensive international trade policy or some international environmental regulation that literally siphons money from the wealthier countries to pay the third world countries for the fact that they're going to be using not as competitive alternative energy sources, that's fine. But just placing a regulation over those third world developing economies is not fine. They're not going to go for that. They'll never join those types of agreements because why would they? Every other industrialized country in the world got to pollute their way to the top. Why are these people going to slaughter their economy trying to like climb the backs of alternative shit energy to get there? No one is ever going to agree to do that.
Well, there's two things. First of all, the one thing about pollution, especially carbon, is that every year is exponentially bigger than the prior year. So like the last 10 years of carbon, I believe, or maybe the last 20, is more than all previous carbon emissions of human history. Because we produce so much, every year we have that exponential growth. So we're putting out gigatons more and gigatons more of CO2 every year. So like when you say the United States in 1920 polluted its way to the top, it did, but the scale of the output in 1920 was so much lower than it is today.
What does this have to do with anything?
No, I'm explaining.
No, you're going on a long explanation to tell me that pollution is bad. I'm not going to disagree with you. So if you're going on some 5-minute road to say like, oh, we can't keep polluting, it's really bad for the environment. I agree, of course. I'm not going to disagree with anything you're going to say.
What I'm saying is that like right now, if you look 10 years ago, I think the United States put out more CO2 than China.
Okay.
Now China is putting out 3 times as much CO2 as we are. And so what I'm saying is in a couple more years, China will have put out more CO2 than all of US history. They might even be at that point. That's called climate debt.
Okay, what does this have to do with anything?
The point is China is not as developed as the United States. So your entire premise of like, oh, we don't want to put these environmental regulations on it because it'll retard the.
I never said that.
That is what you said.
No, I didn't say we don't want to. I'm saying that something more has to happen. I'm saying that you can't just place an environmental restriction on a third world country. That's not enough. You have to do way more than that. There has to have a massive balance transfer, or not a balance transfer. There has to be a massive transfer of wealth from one country to another, subsidizing the fuck out of renewable energy, or you have to have some other way to address it.
No, yeah, I know you're tired, so I don't want to keep arguing. And I'm not totally like ready for a full trade debate right off the top of my head because I know you've been studying really hard. But I would we could talk about Elizabeth Warren's trade plan and why when Michael was talking about this today, and I know you heard it because he repeated it a couple of times, was the idea that we should fold in these labor and environmental groups as co-equal as far as their status within these extra judicial arbitrations or these supranational arbitration panels, right? And something like incorporating labor and environmental regulations in a free trade agreement.
Real quick, just before we hop to this, you acknowledge that just telling a third world country that they're going to be penalized for polluting is not enough, right? Something else has to happen, or that'll never be realistic.
Well, there's two things. What we're doing is we're granting them access to their market. Would you agree that they don't have an absolute right to trade with the United States?
I mean, I guess not. I don't know what relevance that question is, but sure, nobody has a right to trade with anyone.
So the point is, so here's the problem with these free trade agreements in a nutshell.
How do we just jump from my question?
Well, no, I am. I'm explaining, but I have to give a little bit of a framework, which is their free trade, first of all, is a marketing descriptor. It's not what it actually is. It's managed trade. It's just who you're managing it for, number one. And people are saying we should balance that management in a different direction. And that should involve direct subsidy of the development of these developed countries because they were exploited historically and all these reasons. And because we also have an environmental necessity. We can't allow a Chinese model to continue around the world. That's just not a choice that we can make and survive as a fucking species. So when we oppose the TPP, what we're saying is they're operating as if we can afford to continue the same framework of development that existed throughout the 20th century as far as liberalizing trade. And we're facing an economic and wealth inequality crisis in this world that is being exacerbated by these current structure of these trade treaties. That's why people oppose them, not because they're anti-trade. They just want to do trade in a different way that helps ameliorate some of the problems that are created by the existing framework. Does that make sense?
I don't even know why we're talking about that. It has nothing to do with the original question I posed, which was you agree.
Well, okay, fine. What was the original question?
Do you agree that you can't just levy restrictions on developing countries saying you can't utilize fossil fuels the same way all these other countries did to reach the level of sophistication that there has to be something more there?
I thought I did multiple times. We should subsidize like the development of their country.
Okay, cool. That's all. That's it.
Fuels.
That's it. Okay, hop on to your next point then. As long as we acknowledge that.
Hold on. All I'm acknowledging is that, well, first of all, let me go back to that question. Number one, we could.
We can't, though. They're not going to join. Why would they? You'd be destroying their economies. Alternative energies suck right now. There's no way that they would survive.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Do not suck.
Alternative energies are garbage, save for nuclear power, wind, solar. These things are not good sources to build a power grid out of. They're fucking trash right now.
What is this, 2014 Destiny? Like, the prices have gone down significantly in the past
prices in areas where they're, one, highly subsidized, two, you have an incredibly sophisticated economy where you can afford these massive upfront costs, three, where you have the land where you can actually build out
how much
these
do you think a coal plant costs?
My guess, considering the fact that the technology is cheaper, more developed, and the entire world is run on fossil fuel for hundreds of years, probably a lot cheaper than a sophisticated solar panel that's being constantly remodeled and redesigned every 5 years.
No.
Okay, so the whole world is ready to transition to alternative energy. It's cheaper. They're just not because they like to kill the environment? What is this argument?
Okay, first of all, oh, man. Well, Jesus Christ. We really do need to have more of a discussion. First of all, the prices of solar panels, so we can look at them now. Feel free to Google it. Have dramatically declined.
If you want to get solar panels for the roof of your house, I think it takes you like 40 years to make your money back.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, maybe 20 or 30 years.
I
no?
think it's like 8 or 10. Yes.
8 or 10?
Yes.
I think you can make your money back. I think you can make it back in 10 years.
By the way, this is a math problem that has an answer. Somebody in the chat knows the answer to this.
Yeah, we've done it on stream before. I think you can make your money back on 10 years if you only look at the money that you'll make back versus, so like if it costs me $20,000 to like build the solar panels, like how long will it take me to like save the money from that energy or whatever? We'll go, that might take like 10 years. But if you take the money that you would have spent on that instead and had put it in any other place, invested in any other part of your economy, then the growth for that will take you might only not take you longer, like 30 or 40 years to catch up with that, it actually might never catch up. That the $20,000 that you invest in a solar panel roof, if you would have just thrown that into any type of investment fund, you would have made more money back. You would have been better off just letting it grow.
That depends on so many variables. The first is the price of the panels. The second is the price of the fossil fuel energy. And thirdly, we already agreed that you're not capturing the cost of fossil fuels fully within the price paid for electricity.
Sure, but that's a cost that most people are willing to bear.
Do you not understand that we're facing climate catastrophe? I thought you tweeted yesterday about how in 40 years we're all going to die.
Yeah, but the problem with climate problems
makes sense.
Oh my god, it's such a first world look on climate problems. It's such a privileged white person first world oh, the climate is in big trouble, blah blah blah. These are awesome problems for you.
It is not privileged.
It is. You and me can talk about this because we live in nice houses, because we don't have to worry about where our next meal comes from, because our economies are generally doing well. We've got governments that take care of us. We're not getting fucking murdered by our leaders. This is nice stuff from you and me to talk about. One. Two, it is absolutely probably the most important problem facing the planet. I don't disagree with that at all on a global level.
It's not a first world.
No, but the problem is that if you're in a country whose economy is struggling to industrialize, whose people are earning borderline $2 a day for your wages, your food and water is dirty or shit or unavailable, you don't have access to it, going to these people and saying, hey guys, slow down on your economic growth a little bit because climate change, LOL, these people are not going to hear your message.
Okay, first of all, the developing countries are going to bear the brunt of climate change in the near term. So it's not just some sort of white person problem.
Sure.
It's literally threatening their lives in a more acute
and once
way.
They start to bear those costs, I'm sure their tune is going to change real fucking quick. But people don't think that way. If people thought
time is now, motherfucker.
It's not though. It's clearly not. Because people aren't making those bigger investments in alternative energies yet because they haven't seen the worth for it. I mean,
they are.
Okay. And then in that case, we don't need any environmental regulations because these countries will just do it naturally because they're scared of climate change, I guess.
I said. Okay, you're having a leap of logic. I'm saying that the prices are lower and they're now becoming competitive. Number one. Number two, the fossil fuel price is not the true price because it doesn't include the externalities of using it and the damage that we're facing. And three, what I'm saying is the alternative allowing developing nations to use fossil fuels is not tenable. We can't do it. It's not actually a choice.
Well, I mean, it clearly is a choice because they're still using fossil fuels. So, I mean, you're just wrong. I mean, clearly you have the option to burn fossil fuels if you want. So, I mean, it clearly is a choice by these countries.
What you're saying is the full damage of climate change hasn't arrived yet.
Exactly. I believe, of course.
So they're doing it's like jumping off a cliff and saying, well, I haven't hit the ground, so I guess I can jump off a cliff. No, motherfucker, you killed yourself. You just don't know it yet.
Well, that's probably what people will do. I mean, people do this all the time. People overeat them. Yeah, look at how people control their diets. People will eat themselves into diabetes, lose 10 years off their life. Look at the people that still lived in where the fucking Hurricane Katrina hit and killed all the fucking levees and all the fucking people's houses got flooded and shit. Like, people aren't these highly rational actors that are capable of, they come home from their 7 to 9 job, their horrible fucking job in these third world countries, and then they go home and like, oh, okay, time to log into my Twitter account and see what damage climate change has caused today. Like, that's not how people make decisions in like these very poor working areas.
Of course. Oh my God. Of course. But they're going to die when the heat bulb temperature is so high, their sweat doesn't work in their body and they die of fucking heat stroke.
But the problem is until they're actually at that point, much the same when you're dying of a fucking heart attack because you weigh 350 pounds, that's when everybody has the thought, man, I wish I would have ate a little bit healthier. But you can't pretend that people are naturally incentivized into these things before shit actually hits the fans.
Okay, first of all, I didn't say they were naturally incentivized. You asked me, so the original question, if you can even remember, was that should we allow just can you ask it to me again because I now forgot it.
My original question was, you understand that we cannot have a trade policy that just dictates to developing countries that they're not allowed to use.
We have the largest market. We could if we wanted.
Well, no, we don't, because we're not in the new TPP. We left. So, no, we're not even involved in like...
But they're not trading with us then.
They are trading with us. They're just trading with other countries more because they have less barriers to trade in those other countries. I mean, like
Yeah, but they're the ones losing out.
So are we, though. And you don't know if they're losing out.
A little.
Well,
they're losing out a lot more.
Sure, but maybe they'll gain more access to China because China is opening its doors to all sorts of countries in terms of making foreign investment and trade with other countries.
Wait, do you think China allows people to freely trade into their country?
I think that China has made... do you think that China is practicing an isolationist trade policy?
No,
and wait, China lets other countries move in and trade with them all the fucking time. It's been part of their massive growth. It's one of the main ways that China steals IP from other countries. They love it when people go and they build firms in their country because they steal all your fucking shit. Like,
yeah, they have a trade surplus. They have a mercantilist extraction trade policy. That's how they do it. They're not, and by the way, if you go into China, there's extreme barriers to direct foreign investment, and you have to go through all sorts of hoops, and you have no like recourse. The rule of law is extremely exploitive to non-Chinese nationals. Like China is the way more exploitative and restrictive of like foreigners than the United States is. If anything, your argument is making my point. I encourage everybody to go look this up.
Don't even know what this has to do with...
You just said China was more open than the U.S., and I said... No,
I said that China is practicing building out more in these regions than the U.S. is. That while the U.S. is turning away from these multilateral trade agreements, China is reaching out to the rest of the world. I don't right now currently know the current status of how open China is to trade with other countries, but I do know that China is actively practicing initiatives where they're making investments in both property, so whether it's building ports, trade routes, so like building roads, and investments in education and training in other countries. And I know that they're trying to modernize their economy even more. The Build China or Made in China 2025 shit, or 2050 shit, the Belt and Road Initiative that China's working on, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, where they're trying to get free trade going with a lot of other countries, that China is like actively moving out and growing and doing these things. I don't know what the current status is of China's trade with other countries is right now. Maybe it is a little bit more barrier to entry, but none of this still has anything to do with the idea that we're not going to dictate to developing countries that they just can't use fossil fuels. It's totally not related.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm not advocating for that.
Okay, so then we agree. That's all I asked. I just want to make sure we agreed on that.
Okay, calm down. Just because Michael steamrolled you, don't.
Michael didn't steamroll me. I didn't get to fucking talk. So this is my chance to talk a whole bunch. Okay.
Shut the fuck up. All right. What I'm saying is, the United States has the ability to structure its bilateral trade as in the way it wants. So if it wants to have unreasonable things, it's within our power. Is that a good thing? No, I'm not advocating for it. You're saying, can we? Probably we can if we decided to do that. But ultimately, what I'm saying is the alternative you're offering that we allow developing countries to develop using fossil fuels is not tenable.
I didn't say that was an alternative.
Yes, you did.
I said that can't just...
You literally said no one cares, and people eat themselves to death as an excuse for why developing countries...
And none of these things are contradictory. Listen, I'm going to make 3 statements all in a row. None of them contradict each other, okay? Statement number 1, you can't dictate to a developing economy, hey, don't exploit fossil fuels. 1. Number 2, here's another statement. People don't immediately feel the effects of climate change. In fact, until things are literally at catastrophic levels, a lot of people probably won't care. 3, if we're going to rope people into these types of things where they're not allowed to use fossil fuels, there's probably going to have to be some wealth transfer from industrialized countries to non-industrialized countries in order to offset the losses that they're going to endure by making their economy more energy efficient. All 3 of those statements can exist simultaneously. None of them are contradictory. None of them mean that one can't happen or the other can't happen.
Okay, Jesus Christ. All right. So you're advocating for TPP because developing countries have the right to use fossil fuels, even though it's suicidal. They're going to do it because they are irrational. They should be allowed to be irrational.
I never said they should be allowed to be irrational. You're going from a descriptive position to a prescriptive position very quickly. Just because I make an analysis, by the way, if you leave, 2 people in a room with a gun, there's a chance that somebody might kill the other person. Doesn't mean I'm saying somebody should kill the other person or whatever. I'm not making prescriptive statements saying they should abuse fossil fuels. I'm saying that left to their own devices.
You are, because you're advocating for the TPP, which means we should encourage and endorse that development route.
Except as part of these multilateral trade agreements.
To an alternative where we have a binding way of ensuring that development goes through a path that internalizes. Don't interrupt. Okay. I was very quiet while you had your points. As opposed to a binding agreement that involves enforcement on environmental and labor regulations. That's not just an empty promise, an unenforceable promise. Right?
It is enforceable via the ISTS panels, but go ahead.
How? Didn't you just have an argument with Michael where you said that that labor and environmental groups didn't have standing?
Yeah, because other companies can still take governments to court if they think that they're violating some of the provisions of these treaties.
Yes, the companies can take the countries to court, but can the labor unions take it to court? Can environmental groups?
What the fuck? What standing would a labor union have to take another country to court? What would an American labor union standing be to take another country to court for their laws?
Because they're okay. Well, this is the problem with the trade regime we have, right? So what you do is you allow capital to flow freely across borders, but you don't allow labor to. So
wait, what? I'm an open borders guy. I love free flowing labor. What do you mean?
But that's not what these trade agreements arrive at. It's a one-sided thing. So people are bound to their countries by immigration law, but capital can flow to wherever the regulations are the worst, wherever the environmental regulations are the lowest, wherever people have the lowest minimum wages or the lowest wages, and they can exploit those people.
But the whole point, it's so crazy because you're making capitalist arguments right now, right? I don't want all the capital flowing to the places with the lowest wages. Part of the point of the TPP is to enforce international labor standards on these countries just so that doesn't happen. If I'm going to trade with your country, you're not allowed to have child laborers because now my firm can't compete with you, right? That's the whole point.
Jesus Christ. All right. Basically, you want to do another TPP debate. This is what's going on.
No, I don't want to. But the problem is your original clip said that I was using weasel words, and then you keep trying to weasel an argument.
You came in and agreed with me, and then
no, I didn't. I said there are some weasel words. So if I were to say, for instance, some people like the espressos at Starbucks, and you're like, that's a weasel word. Who likes the espressos at Starbucks? Well, I don't think I need a fucking source for that. Okay, much the same way that I don't need a source to say that when you enforce environmental standards on developing countries, that makes them non-competitive. That's just a fact. This is why countries are highly protectionist when they're industrializing. Japan did it. It's one of the reasons why their economy managed to grow. And a lot of other developing countries do this too.
Wait a minute. You just contradicted yourself. You just say countries are protectionist when they develop quickly, and then you say we should have free trade agreements where they don't have any regulations or any labor laws or any industrial policy. Do
you think those are contradictory?
Yes,
because I can talk. Okay, well that's great. Let's talk about that. So I think that countries,
you just contradicted
No, I didn't, but let me explain. Countries that are developing, their goal sometimes is to lock out the rest of the world because they want to grow their own little shit. They want to tariff the fuck everybody else. They want to make their own industries more competitive, so they tell everybody else to stay out, basically. Their goal is to be protected. Their goal is to industrialize as quickly as possible.
But you just said that made them uncompetitive to do. So does it make them uncompetitive?
It makes you uncompetitive when you liberalize trades between very developed nations and undeveloped nations. The trade is going to be more competitive on the side of the developed nation. Do you understand that, or do you disagree with that?
So what do you mean by competitive?
As in, if we were to force a smaller country to open its doors to our products, whatever higher level industry that they build is going to be threatened by American manufacturers. That's part of the reasons why these countries have trade barriers in the first place, is to protect their own local industries.
So what you're saying is that they're more competitive because they have lower wages, lower environmental regulations, lower labor standards. So they're more competitive.
Yes.
So the point I was making about capital finding the areas where the labor environmental regulations are lowest is valid.
Well, no, the whole reason why you make a multilateral trade agreement. Wait, okay, first of all, were you saying that like you disagreed with it? That lower labor, lower cost of labor, lower regulations, environmental or labor, that makes you more or less competitive? Do you disagree with that? That a country with less regulations is going to be has to lower regulations to be more competitive than another economy that's more developed.
You're missing a dimension.
What
the dimension you're missing is productivity per capita. So like those are the four things that you would multiply together in order to derive whether or not it was competitive.
Okay,
so
sure,
like,
but if you have a smaller economy, if you have a smaller...
Let me fucking explain. If your American worker can make 80 widgets because they're better educated, they're better fed, they breathe clean air, they sleep at night, the factory is safe, and the Vietnamese worker can make one widget, it doesn't matter if he's 10 times cheaper than me.
But it does, because clearly...
That's what we see in the actual economy in reality is a lot of first world countries are much, much more productive, have a much higher productivity per worker.
That is not true.
Yes, it is.
It is demonstrably untrue. If this was true, we wouldn't export our supply chains all over the world because it's cheaper to manufacture products in other countries. It is just...
Did you not understand that it's a math problem?
I do understand it's a math problem, but what I'm telling you is the math doesn't work out that the American worker is always so much more productive than a third world country worker that we're never going to export supply chains to other countries.
I never said that.
Oh, okay.
I said that
in your hypothetical world where an American worker is making 80 widgets and a foreign worker is making one widget, and if they were only 10 times cheaper, then in that case, yeah, I would agree with you. But the math doesn't work out with that in any of our global trade. Otherwise, our supply chains would all be within the United States and we would manufacture everything here.
Okay, so...
But one of the things, real quick. One of the things I'm saying is that in these other countries that are less developed, that don't have the economies of scale that we do, part of the only ways that they can be competitive or outcompete us is with worse environmental standards, is with lower labor standards. Like these are how these countries compete. They pollute the fuck out of the environment and they don't give a fuck about their workers. They pay them slave labor sometimes. Like,
so what you're saying is we should engage in these trade agreements where we expose our workers to competitors who work at much lower wages, that will pollute the environment, who will die in mines or whatever, and our workers and our companies in the United States who do have to abide by that should do so with those foreign countries in order, and by the way, it also hollows out our middle class, our manufacturing sector, right? And we become dependent upon that country's manufacturing for our own supply of consumer goods. And so we have an economy where that formerly was a manufacturing economy, where the distribution of income was much more equal across society. We should allow corporations to take the capital that they gained from our domestic market, move it over to some third world country where they have a undeveloped country with poor government institutions, low wages, no environmental regulations, no labor protections. That company can dominate that country, that developing country, build sweatshops, and then export freely, because that's what a mutual trade agreement does. They're allowed to sell their products as if they were American made to compete against our labor and environmental regulations. So aren't you just allowing companies and multinational corporations to skirt around all the regulations that we've deemed in our society to be very important for its healthy functioning? And then all the gains from trade, because remember, those middle class and working class workers no longer have jobs, so they're relying on the social safety net, or they've lost half their income. And the gains from trade all go to the people that own stock and equity in those multinational corporations. So the middle class is hollowed out. The gains from trade all go to the top 1%. And the third world country is now being exploited and the environment is being annihilated. And that is a good idea.
Okay. I didn't want to debate this whole thing again, but I think you just said like 12 things that were highly questionable. Let's run them down. The first thing that you just said is we become dependent on another country. Now, I don't know if you're trying to subtly imply here that having another country manufactures our goods like undermines us as a society or something. We can talk about the idea. There's a specific term for this. I don't remember what it is, but there's some idea that every country should manufacture all of the goods and everything that they need to survive or whatever. I don't know if this is like a communist or like extreme lefty point. This is an absurd point, though. No. You said that we will become dependent on another country's manufacturing. You said that. I wrote it down because I wrote it in my notes. There's nothing wrong with becoming dependent on other countries through trade for manufacturing. We already do this to a large extent. The only way that we can supply enough American cars is because we've exported a lot of our manufacturing to Mexico. Part of the NAFTA deal was the only way that we could keep up with car manufacturing in the United States. So yeah, we do become dependent on other countries to trade. Whoa! Oh my God! You just talked for 50 minutes. Okay, you just made
such a ridiculous statement that I have to clarify.
Write it down, then start writing notes. Okay, just like I did. Okay, so when we export supply chains to other countries, we do it to provide more products to the American people. That's just a reality of these international trade agreements. The idea that every country needs to be some self-sufficient island is insane. Other countries, by virtue of comparative advantage, are much better at manufacturing certain goods than other countries. We should absolutely take advantage of that. That's one of the beauties of globalization. Some countries are really good at some things, other countries are really good at other things. Let countries do what they're best at and then export those products accordingly. This is macro econ 101, okay? Now, the other thing you said was distribution of income was much more equal.
Imagine doing econ 101. Unironically.
Distribution of income was much. Whoa, what did I write this down for? Distribution of income was much more equal across society. Oh, if you have problems with the way that income is distributed across society, then address it with your tax policy. You're not going to do this with a trade agreement. There is no such thing as a multilateral trade agreement that favors small businesses. It just doesn't happen. What does that mean? Like, oh, well, we signed a multilateral trade agreement with the European Union, and now only mom and pop shops can export goods. Like, what does that mean? If you have a problem with the way that income is distributed in your country, address it with your tax policy. Increase your minimum wage. That's how you deal with that. That's the way. It's not going to be done through trade policy. You said another thing about capital is moving to other countries. I don't know what this is getting at. There's nothing wrong with that. Capital flowing around the world in order to change the way that we manufacture supply goods is not necessarily a bad thing. You said something about building sweatshops and exporting freely. That's what these countries already do. They already have sweatshops. Their people are already working for almost nothing. The whole point of these multilateral trade.
Are you ironically saying sweatshops are good? Is this is Cato Institute like bullshit, dude? Come on.
I don't know if that's. I don't think that was an argument. But anyway, these countries already. These countries already participate. These countries are already participating in substandard labor practices. Things like the TPP include provisions to make sure that everybody is on a level playing field. That you are allowing people to use
unenforceable provisions. We've talked about.
How are they unenforceable? The whole point of these provisions is that you're not allowed to join. Okay, well, all right, you're going to write that one down. The whole point of this trade agreement is that you can't continue to do these practices.
30 points now. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm literally not even halfway through. How does it feel? I'm not even halfway through responding.
Like Michael Brooks Jr. over here. Jesus.
I actually don't. I'm actually shocked.
Just fucking with you. Go on.
I don't think so. I wrote down everything you said, and I'm only halfway through. Like you realize that when you start talking, you literally lay out like 50 points that I have to respond to, right? Otherwise, you win the argument by default because you've gotten to like lay out like an entire argument where I disagree with almost every single leg. Like. Okay, so you said, this argument that like, oh, well, they're going to build sweatshops. If you're against that, then multilateral trade agreements are the ways that you bully countries out of doing that. You wouldn't expect an industrializing country to magically have labor standards if the only way that it can remain competitive with larger economies is to abuse the fuck out of its workers. Multilateral trade agreements are one of the ways that we enforce these labor standards on these other countries. You said, allow companies to skirt around regulations. The whole point of these multilateral trade agreements are that countries can't skirt around these regulations. Like, these are regulations that every country has to follow, otherwise Otherwise, people will bring suits against you for it. Like, you have to follow these regulations or you'll get fucked. We sue people all the time. We bring suits to the WTO because we think that some country is participating in either some bad practice where they're subsidizing the fuck out of some product or good that we don't like to. We fight with Canada all the time over their lumber for shit like this. You mentioned something about the middle class or the working class no longer having jobs because of trade agreements. For all the literature that I'm aware of on NAFTA, the only people whose jobs actually get hurt by this, it's usually narrowed down to pretty specific sectors of uneducated people, but the widespread economic consensus is that on average, citizens in the United States are far better off with things like NAFTA in place rather than not having NAFTA in place. There are going to be some people whose jobs are negatively impacted. There are also other jobs that open up parallel to that. Greater specialization of economies that result from an increased liberalization in trade is generally considered to be a positive thing. We export some kind of manufacturing to Mexico. It lets our manufacturers specialize in other types of manufacturing. And everybody in the United States benefits from cheaper goods as a result. The fact that people save money on those cheaper goods makes their lives more affordable, gives them more disposable income, and it allows parallel industries to open up when people have more money to spend on other goods. These are all like uncontested facts of a lot of these multilateral free trade agreements. And then the last thing you said was gains from trade all go to people who own stock or equity. That is absolutely not true. Being able to sell products for cheaper to citizens in a country is something that benefits an entire country. And actually, the idea that we would protect certain sectors of our economy to help only small sectors of our workforce, so for instance manufacturing, actually hurts every single American citizen. The fact that you want to tell every single working family that they have to pay more money for a car because you don't want to have somebody in Mexico build it, but you want to protect a handful, 100,000 jobs in the US of people to manufacture that car is absolutely insane to me. That's the response to all of your points. Okay.
You contradicted yourself. You said that we're both going to enforce environmental regulations using these trade agreements, but also that they're competitive because they have lower environmental regulations. So either they're competitive because they don't have the environmental regulations and it makes it cheaper to manufacture, or we're going to enforce it. You can't have it both ways.
It is both.
So you have revealed your hand, and everybody who advocates for these managed trade agreements that allow multinational corporations to dominate developing countries with sweatshops and environmental pollution, that's what you're saying is, it's actually good for them that they're working 14 hours a week, and that America and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, everyone, all those manufacturing places are hollowed out. And by the way, you said it's not true that all the gains are going to the top 1%, but yet that's exactly what the empirical evidence shows.
The empirical evidence doesn't show that trade agreements only help the top 1%. That is not true. You can say that a majority of the new income generated in a country might be going to the top 1%, but that doesn't mean that cheaper goods and services are all being bought up by rich people. Also,
by the way, you're interrupting me, and I let you gish gallop for fucking 20 minutes.
I'm not gish galloping. I responded to your gish gallop, but okay, go for it.
Jesus Christ.
You also said that, like, you said these economies are only competitive because they have lower environmental regulations, and now you say you want to enforce environmental regulations on the TPP. That's not contradictory. That's just a fact. Some of these countries that do have some advantages in their countries to manufacturing are also competitive because they have really bad labor and environmental standards. The point of a multilateral trade agreement is to force them to play on the same playing field that other countries do. When you have an environmental standard, it makes you less competitive. If you want to trade with another country, you want to force them to have the same standards that you do because you don't want to be uncompetitive compared to them. These aren't contradictory statements.
That's exactly what progressives are advocating for.
Oh, then it sounds like they all should support the TPP.
Because, and this is what you're not, you're just refusing to accept this fact, which is the labor and environmental regulations are unenforceable under these agreements. If it was, and this is something that Michael Brooks said when he was doing his gish gallop against you, which was, oh, if that were the case, everybody would support these deals. But they don't support them because they do not enforce the labor and environmental regulations. That is the fact. And secondly, you can't decontextualize trade from all other issues that are going on in the world. If you look at income based upon the sector of the economy a worker is in when a worker transitions from manufacturing, a unionized manufacturing job, to a service sector job. So here's an example. You're in Western Pennsylvania. You used to be a steel worker. The steel mill moves. It leaves the country. You lose your job at the steel mill. You then go and work at Walmart. You go from making $50, $60 an hour with the pension healthcare benefits to making $10, $12 an hour bad benefits. So the fact that the product has gone down in price by 10% doesn't matter because your personal income has declined tremendously.
Wait, why would your personal income decline? Because
you lost your job at as a union steel worker and you became a stupid Walmart greeter.
Fuck the union steel workers. I don't want every single working family in America to pay more for all of their goods because we're trying to protect one narrow sect of the economy. Why the fuck should I make every working family in America? By the way, poor people spend a disproportionately higher percentage of their discretionary income on necessary goods like cars, okay? Why should I make them bear the brunt of the cost of protecting a narrow industry in our country? That is absolutely absurd. I don't want to tell fucking
Because
Joe
that was an
Schmo
example.
who only makes $25K a year.
Oh,
Listen,
Jesus
man,
Christ.
sorry that you can't really afford a car, but we really...
in the middle of my point. But go ahead.
Because your point is bullshit. We shouldn't have to protect some jobs in the United States and force every other citizen to bear the brunt of those costs when we could just find other ways to deal with those workers who are displaced.
Okay, so here's what I wasn't just saying. I was saying the entire manufacturing sector. So not just steel workers, but all manufacturing, including cars.
Oh.
How many American cars do you think are sold in China? How many American cars do you think are sold in Germany per year? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know how much.
Fucking look it up.
Let's see.
The answer is almost zero. It's like tiny. We're talking about thousands.
I don't think
Because
America makes cars that sell in those markets, though. Like, the American car manufacturers typically are making things like big fucking trucks and shit.
Do you think it's because American manufacturing is just incapable of making cars?
American manufacturing? My dude, American cars are pretty fucking shit. Yeah. Aside from like the F-150s and the Chevy Silverados, as somebody that used to own American compacts, yeah, American compact cars are pretty fucking ass, dude. I mean, they are. What do you want me to say?
But yet American jumbo jets sell all over the world. That's weird. We managed to do that because we have a aggressive industrial policy in our aerospace industry. We don't have an aggressive industrial policy. By the way, everything you're saying about this is totally refuted by the very existence of Germany. Germany has an extensive industrial policy. They manufacture. They have a trade surplus. They have a 3%.
Why do you think a trade surplus is good? Why do you think that matters?
I'm explaining it.
Okay.
Because they have a manufacturing industry that is a large part of their economy.
Why do you think that's why is that superior to a service? Explain these things. I'm really curious.
Because
tell me why a trade surplus is good, and tell me why it's better to have manufacturing than service.
Oh my God! Because and this caused you to get triggered and flip out when I explained that a unionized job in manufacturing is superior than to a service sector job that pays minimum wage and has no benefits. So when Germany manufactures cars and they buy in their own domestic market, and Japanese cars and American cars have very little penetration in that German automotive market, that's good for Germany's economy.
Wait, 80? Oh God, I shouldn't even be letting you get away with these. Fuck, I should do more research. 80% of Buick sales are in China. Oh my God, that's all your other points are. Your empirical data isn't even true. Oh, I'm sorry. Tell me why.
Of Buick sales, that's what. That's not the total Chinese car market. Are you confused?
What does that have to do with anything? Wait, what is that? Wait, so I'm sorry. So American car manufacturers should be supplying the majority of China's cars? What does that mean?
What do you think the top? Okay, let's do Japan. What do you think the top manufacturing is in Japan?
I don't know. Do you know?
They're Japanese car manufacturers. Who's the top manufacturer in Germany? It's German car manufacturers. It's almost like these countries that are developed have an industrial policy that protects their workers, and yet all these ills that you're talking about don't take place, and they have a far more equal societies. Their wealth, their productivity is the same as the United States. These are all facts. And then when I talked about the distributive effects, you hand waved them.
Wait.
Because we went from Hold on. We went from an economy that was primarily a manufacturing economy to one that was primarily a service economy. And there are distributional effects that take place when you do that. And you said, Mike, solve it through taxation policy. Well, if that were true, why didn't we solve it 30 fucking years ago in 1980 when we went down the path that you proposed?
First of all, what are the top?
Hold the fuck on.
Wait, the top three selling cars in America are the Ford F-Series trucks, Ram trucks, and Chevy Silverados. So what is the point?
Oh my God, I didn't say car brand. I said look at the total car market.
Okay.
And look at the different manufacturers.
And the manufacturers and American cars that are sold the most in America are American manufacturers. What point are you trying to make?
Holy shit. You're saying top brands, not top manufacturers. There's a percentage of the market by each manufacturer. This is not that hard of a thing to find. Jesus. Like, Oh my god.
Wait, so are you saying that, like, I'm sorry, so like Ford is manufacturing in China and then shipping the cars to America, or
No, that's not what I'm saying.
wait, what are you saying?
What I'm saying
What's
is
the difference
that
between a
they
brand
have-
and I thought Ford was like an automobile manufacturer. I don't know what you mean. Am I wrong?
yes, yes, and they primarily manufacture in North America.
So if Ford is the number one selling manufacturer in the United States,
No. Oh my god. Oh, this. I'll find it for you.
okay.
See, I shouldn't have picked up the phone because I knew you were gonna try to gish gallop me because you were
I'm
mad.
not gish galloping you. I literally
Michael
write.
Jokes, he dipped in. He got in for an hour. You stood there and waited, and then he dipped out. And now you have all this energy. You have all this energy. So I have to do research on the fly because you.
Okay, you're the one making these claims. So here I linked you something to the statistics displaying the leading automakers in 2018, ranked by U.S. market share. In 2018, Michigan-based GM held about 17% of the car and light truck market in the United States.
What? Okay, this is like paywalled for me.
Okay, listen, I don't even care about this argument. I want to know why you think having a deficit trade balance is bad. I'm super interested on this.
I told you the distributive effects of shifting from manufacturing to service.
What's
The
wrong with
gains
shifting
trade-
from okay, I don't know what that has to do with the trade balance, but what's wrong with shifting from manufacturing to service?
Because the distributional effects outweigh the gains from trade. Because when you have a highly unequal economy, it depresses growth. You recognize that, right?
I don't know. You want to talk about weasel words? What unequal in what way and depresses what kind of growth?
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll make it very clear.
Okay.
Overall, GDP growth is
Okay.
reduced in countries that are highly unequal in the distribution of income. So, for example, the United States in the last 30 years, the top 1% have gained $20 trillion in wealth, and the bottom, what was that? Bottom half lost 90 billion. So, what I'm saying is the distributional effects is when you go from a manufacturing economy to a service economy, that results in more money for the top part of the scale and less for the rest of the economy as a whole. And as that inequality compounds upon itself, the lower income results in lower consumption, which results in the economy growing. You rightfully pointed out that middle class people and poor people have a higher propensity to consume. And our economy, I believe, is now an 80% consumptive economy. So when we have a lower take-home pay, lower disposable income, we have lower growth. And so trade, by changing those distributional effects, by changing from those highly equal manufacturing economy to a highly unequal service economy, you result in net. So you can't isolate trade alone from all the effects it has on the rest of the economy.
So okay, yeah, sure.
There might have been, and this will be the last sentence. There might have been a way that you could have taxed the hell out of the rich and then spent a ton of money redeveloping the country on infrastructure and retraining people and paying for relocations and paying for education and doing a million things. But we don't do that. All we do is we outsource the jobs, the manufacturing jobs overseas, and then all the gains that happen go in the pocket of capital, and none goes in the pocket of labor, or AKA working class and middle class people. That's why there is a movement to have trade agreements that don't allow corporations to outsource jobs to vulnerable developing countries and then pollute the hell out of their environment, build sweatshops, kill labor leaders, and kill trade unionists, which Coca-Cola, as an example, has been caught doing, funding death squads to prevent people from unionizing. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. I'm not saying that I'm not anti-trade, but what I am saying is you should have a rational policy where you have co-equal societies, not one that has a capitalist class that's exploiting a developing country. We can trade with those developing countries by providing them with development insurance. I'm sorry, I kept going. But the point is Like,
Sure.
you
Okay,
are
like,
offering
so-
a false choice.
No, you want to
False
talk
choice.
about a false choice? Let's talk about the first thing that you brought up. A really good union-protected manufacturing job compared to working at Walmart. What do you think a service economy means? Do you think a service economy means that we're taking every single manufacturer and putting them into work at Walmart? That's not the only types of services that America exports, especially being the tech capital of the world. That is absolutely not the type of quote-unquote service economy that the United States has. Firstly. Secondly, if you want to make, okay, this whole thing about trade balance, like whether you have a trade deficit or not, has to do with the net balance of savings versus expenditure in your country. I don't even know if this, I've never heard of this being linked to increasing inequality in a country before. Rather that just like a trade balance is really just an expression of how much your country spends versus how much your country saves. There's like this really common misconception that having like a trade deficit or running it is bad or causes like money to leave your country. And usually these are just like very naive analyses of how trade
means, Steve. That's what trade deficit means.
Trade deficit.
It means we're sending more money to the country.
I don't have time to talk about this right now, but I highly employ. No, that is absolute. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. It absolutely doesn't. I promise you, okay? We're not going to go into that, okay? I implore you to read what a trade deficit actually is, though, okay? It doesn't mean you're just sending money overseas. I promise you, okay? So,
Steve, what do you think happens? Wait. What do you think happens when we buy goods from China?
When you buy goods in another country, when you have foreign currency, or when you have your own currency that's floating in another country, that currency comes back to your country in the form of investment and other types of capital. That is absolutely what happens in every single situation where a trade balance is present. We might spend or purchase more goods and services from a country like China, but that money always finds its way back to the U.S. in the form of investment in other U.S. businesses or U.S. real estate. That is absolutely what happens. I don't want to talk about this right now. If you want, you can go and read into that shit, but I promise you that a trade deficit is not just us shipping money overseas and losing it forever. That absolutely does not happen, okay?
No,
Wait,
right.
I wrote down all these other points. I have to respond to them. You gishgal the fuck out of me. I have to respond to all your points, okay?
Oh, God.
So you brought up the trade balance, okay? You brought up this idea that a service economy somehow slows down your economic growth. I would love to read a paper on that actually illustrates the idea.
That's not what I said.
Stop. You said that going from a okay, tell me if you said this or didn't say this. You said that going from a manufacturing economy to a service economy causes your overall GDP growth to slow. Did you say that or did I misunderstand you?
I said it causes your growth to slow because of the distributive effects of putting more money at the top and less among workers. And I didn't say that every single service economy job was
okay. Sure. But that was okay. I understand. Okay. Let me finish. That was
one of the jobs you could have in a service economy would be Twitch streaming.
Sure.
That's great for the Twitch streamer, and the ones that have more views and more subs make a lot of money, and that tends to be a select few. And most of the people that Twitch stream don't make shit. Go to twitch.tv.
Okay. So basically, you did say it. Yes, central_committee. Yes. So you did say that. I don't know why you just took it. So you did say that. So I would love to read a paper on that. My understanding is that countries have explosive growth as they industrialize, but eventually that growth tapers off. And that is a very strange place we find ourselves in the first world, where a lot of people are starting to wonder if some of the explosive growth, the explosive GDP growth that some countries have had is at some points unsustainable. That eventually we will taper off to a 1% to 2% growth. Now, the explanations that I've read for that is that that's just kind of the natural end state of these fully developed massive economies. It's not that we're moving to a service economy, it's that there's just only so much room for growth. You can't expect a first world, fully industrialized, massive economy of scale like the United States to grow at the same rate as India or China. That is just highly unbelievable. Secondly, these other countries that you're citing, and I'll throw you a quick link here, it's not like Germany has this massive percentage of its economy that is still in manufacturing compared to what it was in the 1970s.
Oh yes, it has declined since the 70s.
Sure, and everybody has switched to more service.
Income inequality is a problem all over the Western world, but the countries that have mitigated the decline of the manufacturing industries have less of a problem with income inequality than those like ours we have the lowest manufacturing sector than of all other similarly situated countries. And that's because our policy has allowed our manufacturing industry to be hollowed out.
I don't know if just because your manufacturing industry doesn't make up a greater percentage of total employment, that necessarily income inequality follows from that. I have no idea how you get from A to B there.
Okay, well, this is an empirical question, and we need to get. This is why I didn't want to debate this tonight, because I need to pull together the studies for you to read.
Okay,
Steve, like you spent a lot of time studying a lot of Cato Institute talking points prior to this debate. with Michael.
Firstly,
didn't
I
get the
don't just study
opportunity.
Cato Institute talking points. That is one institute that I do draw studies from, sure. However, if we look at like the
And by
IGM
the way, your
polling
graph
people
proves my
on free
fucking
trade.
point. But your graph proves my point. Like
What?
Germany has the highest manufacturing, so they have lower income inequality.
Yeah, but their manufacturing has been falling dramatically since the 70s. Everybody's moving towards a service economy. This idea that Germany is this massive manufacturing economy is not true. And this idea that America doesn't buy cars made in America is also not true. And this idea that America doesn't sell cars in China is also not true. Everything you're saying is empirically wrong. But somehow you're getting from your misfounded empirical observations to saying, well, the reason that we're moving to a service economy is also the same reason that income inequality is growing, which you haven't even demonstrated the connection of.
Steve, you're getting excited because you're mischaracterizing what I said. It would be unreasonable for me to say America sells 0 cars in China. I said they had a tiny fragment of the market, and that if you examine every other country's car market, it's dominated to a much greater degree by domestic manufacturers than ours.
Like the American is. So be clear there. Are you saying that the majority of cars sold in America are not made by American manufacturers?
I don't want to see. That's a question with a mathematical answer. I have to go.
Well, because you just made that claim. So how can you not know it?
I said that we sell more foreign cars in the United States than any other developed country's car market, which is an objective fact. To a much greater degree do we allow foreign car manufacturers in the United States than they do in every other similarly situated country, including China.
Okay. I don't even know what your claims are.
Okay. All right. But here's my claims. Here's my claims. I'll make them for you so it's very simple.
Is this true? Do we sell 23% of the vehicles manufactured in China as America? I wouldn't. That sounds like a huge number to me. That's amazing if it's true, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Are you ready?
Go for it.
The current trade regime that we've had over the last 30 years that you're advocating for has created the deindustrialization of the United States.
Great.
Right? Which you call is a good thing.
Yes.
Which has rapidly increased income inequality. There's other things that have caused it as well, as like increased financialization of the economy. Like there's more debt, more credit available, so a lot more people have high debt, so they have a much reduced ability to create wealth. We have done stuff like cut back on public services like education. It's much more expensive now to get a college education than it was in the 70s and the 80s. So there's all these other reasons that things have become more unequal, but trade is one of them. And that distributional effect, and I think like I should just find you a study, and we should reconvene with more studies.
Sure.
Because you're just listening to what I say, and it's whether or not you believe I have credibility or not.
Well, no, I mean, I know, like, for instance, like the widespread economic consensus on, for instance, NAFTA is that it benefited the average American consumer. That's just like, it's not even a contested point.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, do you see the way you're modifying it? And I know we got a little bit yelly.
How am I modifying it?
By the way, everybody watching,
Yep.
Destiny and I know how to compartmentalize yelling over ideas for bad feeling. It's nothing but love from you to me. Am I right?
So far. We'll see how long that lasts.
There you go. But the point is that, so those, what was I even saying? Fuck. The distributional effects. I was reiterating this point.
You were saying that the distributional effects created by our imbalance in trade and the shift from manufacturing to service has caused inequality to grow or something.
Yes. And that's an empirical fact.
Well,
the
two observations are empirical. Connecting one to the other, I'm not as sure.
Well, the reason why is because service industry jobs tend to pay less. So on the average, in the aggregate, than manufacturing jobs among the
I absolutely can't let that. I have to see a source for that. Like when you say that like doctors and lawyers and software engineers, that these things are considered service jobs, that in an aggregate these pay less than manufacturing.
Those are the very top end.
Okay, I guess it's possible that if enough manufacturing jobs were protected by union pay, and then we weigh down the service jobs with enough Walmart tier jobs, that maybe that's true. I don't know. I have to see that.
I mean, again, so like I think the problem that we're having is you're just not I'm making empirical claims. You don't agree with them, and so we're kind of coming to a standstill because unless we can fully marshal that, and you can look at, like, for example, the World Bank just put out a paper a couple years ago where they said increased inequality was reducing GDP growth. Like and the World Bank is hardly a communist or leftist organization, but they underline the point I'm making. Let me find it. Let me find it for you, because I think this is easy to find with Google.
Not to mention the fact that, and we haven't even gotten into this, but I don't even know if the manufacturing jobs that they got back here, like they would still be like borderline, like these would be engineering jobs, right? We're never bringing back jobs where people are working in plants again, making, high wages that are protected by labor unions. Like these are going to be like computer engineers and people building robots. Destiny, this is the link he's thinking of.
What does it say?
Inequality hurts economic growth, finds OECD research. 9/12/2014. Reducing income inequality would boost economic growth, according to new OECD analysis. This work finds that countries where income inequality is decreasing grow faster than those with rising inequality. The single biggest impact on growth... By the way,
would you say that our inequality is rising or declining?
It seems to be rising from what I'm aware of. I don't know if that's due to trade, though. That could be due to a whole other number of things.
I said that was one element.
I don't even know if that's a major... Say this now, you want to talk about Weasley? That's one element. If it's something that contributes to it 1%...
Well, because the economy is complicated and everything's interdependent. You can't just pull one thing out and isolate everything from one another. The complexities are too great.
Sure, but there are probably some things that we can look at that are probably having a much bigger impact on inequality. So, for instance, things like capital gains tax probably has a much greater impact on inequality than the difference between capital gains and ordinary income.
That's an empirical claim. You have to prove that. So I've made empirical claims. So everybody... In order for me to be refuted, and then I might reform my opinion, I'm open to that, is that the distributional effects from transitioning to manufacturing to service have been bad for inequality. So this is the logic.
So what you just made was not an empirical claim. Do you understand? So here's an empirical, here you're making two empirical claims, okay? And then you're making one like normative statement. You're saying one, trade inequality has grown, and then two, we're increasing our movement from manufacturing to service. The idea that those two things are causally linked, that's a whole other claim that you absolutely have not demonstrated. So you can't just say that you've made that empirical claim that's just true, and I haven't refuted it. What?
You garbled that. I didn't restate the things. They were garbled.
You're making two separate claims. You're saying that we've moved from a manufacturing to a service economy, and you're saying inequality has grown. That's two separate observations, both of which I agree with, but those two things aren't necessarily causally linked to one another.
Well, I made another, which is another empirical claim, in that service sector jobs pay less than manufacturing jobs.
That still doesn't necessarily causally link the other thing it doesn't link them all together.
How is that? Of course it's causal.
No, it's not.
If trade is causing deindustrialization, or is an element in deindustrialization, you agree with that at least, right?
That trade is causing industrialization?
Deindustrialization, meaning...
When you say deindustrialization, you mean that manufacturing jobs are decreasing as a percentage of the overall employment of the economy.
And so a manufacturing job, for example, like Carrier in Indiana, right? They had that manufacturing plant here in the United States, and they decided to move it. They automated some of it, and they relocated some of it to Mexico, right?
I don't know if trade is causing that or just automation. Like manufacturing jobs.
They couldn't move it to Mexico if Mexico didn't have complete free access to the United States market.
Sure, but if they kept it in the U.S. market,
they're selling the air conditioners to Americans. They're not.
But if they kept it in the U.S. market,
hold on. They're selling the air conditioners to Americans, not Mexicans who make $1 an hour at the sweatshop. So, like,
first of all, I don't think Mexicans make $1 an hour. Secondly,
yes, they do.
Okay,
yes, they do.
Secondly,
oh my God.
Secondly, oh fuck, I don't even remember what your first point was. It was so wrong. Oh God, what was it? Oh, secondly, the manufacturing jobs that have remained in America, even in China, manufacturing jobs are lost to automation. Like,
of course.
So even if these jobs, even if the manufacturing stayed here, there is no guarantee that we would have all these manufacturing jobs. That it would still be some larger percentage of the overall economy.
I never made that claim, Steve. I never made that claim.
Wait, then why do you care if manufacturing stays here if it's all becomes automated and those jobs don't exist and wealth inequality would continue to grow anyway?
Again, there's a difference between it declining and it all happening. Like,
this isn't Weasley, right?
That's not Weasley at all. Like,
okay.
you mischaracterized what I said. Like,
okay.
I know we all agree that automation is decreasing manufacturing in this country.
Oh, like okay. I thought you said it was because of trade.
I'm sorry. I said it. Oh my God. How many times could I say trade is one element in the economy and things are interrelated?
What percentage of would you have to give? Do you have to give trade?
Steve, that's an empirical data point that I don't have at my fingertips, but I'm humoring you because I see that psychically you need the opportunity to get all your studying out. So I'm helping you out here. But
Okay.
so because when I woke up today, I didn't think, Stephen Benelli is going to be debating me on trade today. I thought, oh, I'll take it easy. I'll watch Michael Brooks and you debate on trade, see if I pick up some new information, and it'll be interesting. And instead, that didn't happen. And so you called me up, and I'm here for you because I see that you need it. And
well,
I'm
listen,
I'm being a new friend.
Watch through the debate, and you can write down a big old list of claims for me and shoot him, and we'll have a conversation about them, and it'll be so much fun. Okay.
Oh my God, Steve.
Yeah.
I want you to look into these claims.
Okay.
The one about the manufacturing, so changing jobs from manufacturing to service, increasing inequality. If I'm wrong on that, I'd like to see your points. This is not like I'm actually seriously trying to get smarter. I hope that's what your goal is too. It's not about defending a position. Like that's why I think our last conversation went better because we were not trying to defend positions and getting our egos all tied up to being right or not. We were just trying to figure out what the correct answer is based on the empirical data. And we focused on the data, not on catching each other in stupid fucking points.
Okay, the last conversation that we had opened with you catching me on how you define the word moderate economically, okay? Firstly,
I did not use shady debate tactics.
Secondly, that was the very first question you asked me is, what do you think? Do you think most Americans have moderate economic views? And I was like, yeah, I would say so. And then you're like, actually, no, they're quite left leaning because look at this data. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I guess. I thought when you said moderate, you meant like capitalist, not like socialist. And you're like, oh no, Steve, you're changing your answer. So I'm just being very clear on the definitions now. Okay, I'm not trying to play gotchas. The only reason I called you is because I saw a clip where you said I was being weaselly. So I came over here.
And you admitted that was weaselly.
No, I didn't. I said that there are some broad claims.
You clarified what you meant.
No, I didn't say that was weaselly. I don't think that I think if somebody walked into any econ classroom and said, hey, some people say that when third world countries are forced to play by our environmental standards, it makes their economies less competitive. Nobody in that class would be like, where's your source for that? Where's your source for that? They'd be like, oh yeah, of course. This is like common knowledge, obviously, that making a developing country play by the same environmental standards as a fully developed economy is going to make them less competitive. That's like a given. That was the only thing I came to say is because you said it was a weaselly thing.
That's a tautology. That's just saying that regulations that make it more expensive to manufacture mean it's more expensive to manufacture.
Amen. Then you agree with me, buddy. Then that's all we needed. There we go. Amen. Okay.
Nobody disagrees with that.
All right. Then I wasn't weaselly then. I was just stating a tautology that more.
But here's the point. Here's the point you're missing.
Yeah?
You have yet to tell me why it's a good idea to suspend those environmental regulations.
I never said it was a good idea to suspend those environmental regulations.
But that's what you're allowing American capital to do when it leaves a country where it's not able to invest in projects that. So let me explain it.
Wait, I understand what you're saying.
American company could not manufacture in America by ignoring those environmental regulations because the U.S. government would stop them. But if it moves to Vietnam, maybe it can dump poison upstream from a village and give 1,000 kids brain tumors. And because Vietnam's government is not strong enough to challenge that company, they get to make more profit. And
what? No, the ISDS panels don't let you pollute in another country. People have historically lost cases where they've tried to bring suits to countries about environmental reasons. What are you talking about?
Have you seen what downtown Beijing looks like?
What does that have to do with ISDS panels regulating, having foreign firms suing a government to change their environmental regulations?
Oh my God. The trade agreements allow foreign direct investment in these countries because they are assured that those goods they manufacture in the other country can come back to the American market and compete with goods that are forced to follow those environmental regulations. So let me give you an example. Company A and Company B, they both exist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They manufacture the same commodity, widget A. So just widget. Company A moves over to China, right? And they set up a factory. And they don't, in factory in China, they don't have to follow the environmental regulations anymore. They get to pollute into the air. And so everybody in that Chinese village is affected by the negative externality of that pollution. And it causes sicknesses and illnesses in that village. But who gives a shit? I am the investor. I live in New York City.
If you
Then
want,
that-
wait, what is
That's
the,
good. Hold on, let me finish. It's almost done. The hypothetical is almost done. You like hypotheticals, right? And then you take Company A's product is brought back to America and put on a shelf next to Company B's product. And Company A's product is 20% cheaper than Company B. So you, the consumer, go into the store, you buy Company A because it's cheaper, right?
Yep.
So what's happening here is the American Company A that moved its manufacturing to China is allowed to avoid the regulations that it would be following in America. So what you're doing if American government signs a trade deal with China where it allows that to happen, what you're saying is it's okay for that environmental regulation to be gone around.
The whole point,
really
I don't understand.
stupid,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
that does sound really stupid.
But that's what happens.
But that isn't what happens. That
What?
okay.
Am I?
Yes, you are.
Guys, please. You're telling me that Chinese manufacturing doesn't have lower environmental regulations than American manufacturing?
I'm saying that the point of signing a multilateral trade agreement like the TPP is to make sure that they play on the same playing field.
But they don't. So
That's the TPP did.
That's the factual problem that we come to.
On whether or not it had environment. I mean, I can link you the text of the TPP. I mean, we can read it together if you want. Like
whether or not the TPP's environmental statements are enforceable, or if they are just dicta. Do you know what dicta is?
Like dictated to somebody and not acted upon.
It just basically means in a legal decision. Sometimes the judge writes other shit that's not binding on future courts. And he's writing like a story like, oh, it'd be really nice if you cared about the environment. That's
okay.
What those
well, listen,
mean.
I will look into the TPP. My understanding for the TPP stuff is that there are fines that are enforced on the country if they don't follow certain environmental regulations. I'll look into that more to see what the exact fines are or how it's determined. But every problem that you're having right now with manufacturers polluting, that's happening right now. If you don't sign the trade deal, then it's just Chinese firms that'll do that, and then they'll ship these products over the United States. Like it's not like China. It's not like Beijing is polluted because other firms are coming in from other countries and polluting them. Right? That's China's own environmental policy that's making those decisions.
But it's the reason the capital exists in China to build those factories in the first place is because they're coming from foreign direct investment.
You literally opened this argument up telling me that China doesn't let other people come into their country. Which one is it?
That's not what I said.
Yes, you did. You literally said that China has one of the most protected economies, that they don't let other foreigners come in and invest in their country and do shit. That was one of the things you made.
Oh my God. They allow them to come in and bring money, but they can't take it out. And they have to partner with the Chinese investor. There's a million loops they have to jump through. Like, that's what I didn't say they didn't allow any direct foreign investment. What?
Okay, so I don't know why you objected on that point with me earlier then. Okay, we'll reconvene. Okay.
We need to reconvene on this one because, and by the way, like, this is all related to whether or not these hypothetical provisions are enforceable under the text.
Sure. And it seems
we need some authorities because we might just have a difference of opinion. So we need somebody who can adjudicate this. That's the issue. And there are people on one side who agree with that, and there are people on the other side that don't.
Just to be clear, so you said with the China thing that China lets foreign investors invest money into their country, but they're not allowed to get anything out of it.
That's not what I said.
Wait, can you say what you said one more time?
I said they had capital controls.
Yeah.
Foreign direct investors, they have regulations, like they have to have Chinese partners.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on the domestic Chinese manufacturing investment.
Can you get money out of investments that you make in China, or is it impossible?
Of course you can.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Of course you can.
Okay.
But the point is, China is developed by allowing this foreign direct investment. They sacrificed environmental and labor regulations. And the companies got something out of it too. They got to hire people at wages lower than Western workers.
Okay.
And they got to pollute at levels they wouldn't be permitted to in the developed countries. But yet their goods were treated equally in those Western consumer markets. We understand that, right?
Yeah.
So the people who gained from those transactions was China gained because they had foreign direct investment,
Mm-hmm.
and the owners of those companies gained because they were able to get more profits. And the people who lost out were those that weren't employed by the sweatshop but lived next to them and breathed the polluted air.
And who else gained?
And I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
And then the American manufacturing employee, the union member who lost his job, he lost tremendously, right? And then we have some sort of nebulous gain for the quote consumer as a whole, the U.S.
Okay.
And so the question is whether. But here's the thing. Here's the question.
This is so emotionally loaded.
It's not emotionally loaded. These are just facts, my dude.
Yeah, a fact is that if you export like supply chains to other countries, you will sell your products for cheaper in the country. Like that's the whole point of doing it, is to make your industry more competitive. So there's not a nebulous gain by consumers. There is a direct reduction in price.
You mean make the manufacturing costs for the corporation lower?
Yes, which is generally made so that you could sell the product at a lower price so that you can drive competitors out of business.
AKA competitors who are following environmental and labor regulations.
In
other words, American manufacturers who don't outsource are in direct competition with companies that are destroying the environment and abusing workers in foreign lands and operating sweatshops. And that's a good policy.
Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. You are right there. I think that the best way to deal with that would be to have a multilateral trade agreement that enforces environmental regulations on every country that they do business in. Holy shit, you fucking figured it out. That's amen. I'm going to find out what policy that is or was that may or may not have gotten passed even without America, and I'm going to jump on board with that, okay? Thank you, Mike. I love you, okay? We'll reconvene on the TPP debate, and it'll be
We can probably debate about this for another 20 hours, but I'm going to bring all the facts I can.
Go for it.
We do this.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
All right.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah?
Central Committee TV.
Central_committee. You're not saying your name right.
I know, because Jesus Christ. But go over there. If you want to see more yelly debates, follow me so that it's worth my time and Steve's time. Come on over. And you can tell me that I lost this one. Mike, he got you. It's 1-1.
Don't worry. 90% of my fan base hates me anyway. You know how most of America's cars are apparently manufactured from China? Most of my fan base is manufactured from the Soviet fucking Union. So don't worry. They'll all side with you anyway, okay?
Spamming no in chat, too, if you hate me. Do
all right.
that.
I love you, buddy. It's been fun, okay? Stay safe.
You, buddy. We'll see you later.
Fuck me. Okay. I just want to fly Kerbals around. Are the fines imposed by the TPP agreement on pollution more than the profit made by breaking the rules? They probably should be, otherwise it wouldn't make much sense. Do you want to know something funny? The Mexican minimum wage near the U.S. border is higher than the U.S. minimum wage? No way.
I would
play StarCraft.
Would Congress deregulate derivatives? Why would the Trump administration relax laws on mining pollution? Why would they do that?
What is deregulating derivatives or things related to the EPA have to do with
Just
trade
follow
agreements?
plastic.
That's a really good counter, by the way. It is a Destiny level hypothetical. Not even a Destiny level hypothetical, but it is kind of a Destiny level hypothetical. All right, fuck it. Yeah.
I need a break, dude. I'm on attack by all sides. I got fucking 400 million fucking people. That Cody guy was in my fucking responses today.
10 months of giving a million.
I like all these people too. Fuck me. If that Cody guy wants to come on and chat, we could do him too. The one guy that does the Somewhere Now news or something. I don't remember.
1 year pug.
I'm so confused. Not too long ago, you were debating righty dipshits about bringing back manufacturing jobs. Now you're doing the same with lefties. Can you explain? Populists in general have like a couple of behaviors that they follow. A populist, usually, like the main talking points of a populist are, I can help you, I'm your friend, everybody else is the enemy, right? The elites are your enemy.
How can someone get the unicorn smarticle particles when they work a full-time job and have little time to research? Are we just fucked?
Yep. Populists identify everybody else, like the elites, the political people, like the companies, corporations, like other countries sometimes. Like that's generally how populists do it. Everybody else is the outside and the enemy, and they're going to be your path to salvation. So in this sense, Donald Trump is a right-leaning, conservative populist, or fascist populist, depending how you look at it. Donald Trump identifies everybody else as the enemy.
This was fun to watch. Thanks. As an omni-god liberal, I appreciate your honesty in debates, but it is frustrating seeing someone with a clear political agenda and opinion use rhetoric and cherry-picked facts.
Nice. Donald Trump is a right-leaning populist. He identifies, right, all the political elites drain the swamp, like the academic elites, like all of these people are the enemy,
Have a
right?
drink, my treat.
Thanks. And thanks for the 2 separate peanut conspiracy. Bernie Sanders is considered a left-leaning populist, right? One common thing that populists do is populists say, hey,
Welcome back, buddy.
globalists have tried to fuck you. All these other bigwigs are trying to fuck you. I'm going to give you salvation. One of the ways that I'm going to do that is we're not going to let all these other people take our gerbs. We're not going to let them take our gerbs, okay? We're going to protect our gerbs. We're going to make it so we're not going to buy shit from those countries. We're going to buy America. Remember those deals? Buy America, okay? That's what we're going to do, right? Populists love that message. It works for Bernie Sanders. It works for Donald Trump. We're going to bring back manufacturing. We're going to make products in America and buy them in America. Manufacturing is the base of all foundations because that's where a lot of our strong labor unions were, and it plays well with our basis rhetoric, right? But that's why you see similarities sometimes between left-leaning positions and right-leaning positions on trade. Do you honestly think manufacturing economies like China and Vietnam are more equal than service economies? I don't know. Is income inequality better in China and Vietnam? I'm not sure. When he brought up the trade balance deficit, I was convinced of horseshoe thing. Oh, God. Okay, so trade... I honest to God, I don't even have a good enough understanding of this to explain it to you. We actually read a decent bit about this on stream, but it's a little bit more complicated. But basically, your trade deficit is a function of your net spending versus your net savings. That any country that spends more than it saves necessarily has a trade deficit. That's all your trade deficit is. Your trade deficit isn't you just sending money to other countries and losing it forever. That is an insanely naive analysis of what trade means with other countries. It doesn't work that way. Money doesn't just ship off and disappear forever. If that was the case, then like the United States being funded by other countries buying our debt, buying our treasury bonds, it's not like we're, oh no, China's buying USD. They bought treasury bonds. Our money, it's going away. They're taking all our money. They're buying it all. It's like, that's not how that works.
He wants to ban private insurance that covers things covered by Medicare for all.
But Medicare for all is going to be expanded to cover everything.